Welcome to ASP Stuff Radio, the internet radio show where we talk about a whole bunch of stuff like the origins of cat species, baseball, quarks, protons, and croutons, and the biggest scandal in United States history, Russiagate. Today is Friday, May 31st. I'm your host and wannabe special counsel investigator, Alberotle. And for the first time in ASP Stuff Radio history, my endearing co-hosts, Stevocrates and Pauleto, are not with me. This is a special 4-part series devoted entirely to a deep dive analysis of the corrupt origins of Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation into Russia interference with the 2016 U.S. presidential election and alleged links between the Trump campaign and Russian government officials. What originally started out as a brief outline for a typical ASP Stuff Radio episode gradually morphed into a detailed 60-plus page report with a lot of audio clips. I therefore decided that I would first present my analysis as a series of episodes, and then in another segment, Stevocrates, Pauleto, and I will have an interactive discussion of the Alberotle Report on the corrupt foundation of Russiagate. But before I begin, if you enjoyed this special episode or any of our previous episodes, please help support our small independent podcast on our website, aspstuffradio.com, or directly at paypal.me/ASPstuffradio donate. Your contributions will help us keep producing more informative and entertaining episodes for your listening pleasure. Thank you for your support and thank you for listening. In his Meditations on First Philosophy, René Descartes, a famous 17th century French philosopher and mathematician, introduced as part of his philosophical method the intriguing and thought-provoking malicious demon, sometimes called the evil genius. This hypothetical demon was entertained to show how everything that Descartes thought he knew was nothing more than a grand illusion. He says, "I will suppose that some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. I shall think that the sky, the air, the earth, colors, shapes, sounds, and all external things are merely the delusions of dreams which he has devised to ensnare my judgment." We can refine and apply this skeptical scenario to ourselves, but instead of envisioning an intangible demon, imagine that it is our tangible U.S. government, or at least certain parts of the government, the established elite, upper echelon, deep state, and the corporate media, that is doing the deceptive engineering, the goal of which is to manufacture consent, a phrase coined by Walter Lippmann and adapted by Noam Chomsky in his work on the propaganda model and how it was used in mass communications media. Perhaps this evil genius has succeeded in manipulating and ensnaring your judgment that the current president of the United States is in cahoots with the Kremlin. What if your belief is based on an utter falsehood, a fabrication devised by the all-powerful malicious demon? The aim of this special episode, or the Alberotle Report, is twofold. One, to expose the corrupt origins of the false Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy that has been systematically propagated by the mass media for over 2 years. And two, to expose the real political corruption, obstruction, and hypocrisy revolving around this dubious narrative. In Greek, the word for truth is aletheia, meaning disclosure, as in to open up, reveal, or expose in plain sight. This suggests that truth remains hidden, especially if and when the mainstream media keeps it concealed by distracting you with misleading information, hyperbole, and other nonsense. Without the pertinent and crucial facts revealed in plain sight, you risk being permanently entrapped by the malicious demon's control and hastily drawing wrong conclusions about this historical scandal. The Alberotle Report is the antidote to the evil demon's cunning powers. Part 2. A brief review and analysis of the conclusions of Mueller's report. On May 17, 2017, Rod Rosenstein, then U.S. Deputy Attorney General, appointed Robert Mueller as a special counsel to conduct an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, and if members associated with the Trump campaign were complicit. The problem with the appointment is that the special counsel investigation was fundamentally flawed from the outset because the decision upon which it was established violated federal regulations. Federal Regulation 28 CFR 600.1 clearly states that the acting attorney general, quote, will appoint a special counsel when he or she determines that criminal investigation of a person or matter is warranted, unquote. Rod Rosenstein even stated that his decision was not grounded on criminal law. He says, quote, my decision was not based on finding that crimes have been committed or that my prosecution is warranted. I have made no such determination, unquote. But many have argued that a criminal law violation is required for establishing a special counsel. The only crime that was reported during the 2016 election was the alleged hacking of the DNC computers by Russian officials. However, there was no evidence that President Donald Trump or his campaign associates were complicit in that crime. In fact, as you will see in this report, there was no legitimate evidence of Trump-Russia collusion since July 2016. Thus, there would have been no need to appoint a special counsel in May 2017. Even so, Mueller must have been briefed about the counterintelligence investigation led by former FBI Director James Comey. If so, Mueller should have ended his investigation much sooner. Many have insisted that obstruction of justice was the crime, in particular when Trump fired James Comey. But that is also implausible because to obstruct justice, there must be an underlying crime to obstruct. Nevertheless, on Thursday, April 18, 2019, Robert Mueller's final redacted report on the alleged collusion between Trump and his campaign associates and the Russian government to overthrow the 2016 U.S. presidential election was released to the public. The investigation lasted for 2 years, and it produced more than 2,800 subpoenas, 500 search warrants, 500 witness interviews, 40 FBI agents, 19 lawyers, 199 criminal charges, 37 indictments or guilty pleas, 5 prison sentences, and approximately $25 million in taxpayer funds. The verdict? Not a single American was charged with conspiracy or coordination with Russia. More specifically, quote, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in the election interference activities, unquote. Granted, there were various ties, interactions, meetings, and links with Russian nationals or people who have had ties with Russian nationals, but none of those interactions prove that Trump or members of his family or anyone associated with his 2016 election campaign, such as Trump Jr., George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, or Paul Manafort, were controlled by or working as agents for the Russian government to sway the election. As for obstruction of justice by President Trump, according to the report, there were at least 10 instances where he may have attempted to impede the investigation, but ultimately there was no definitive conclusion on whether Trump had criminal intent to obstruct justice. Mueller states, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that prevent us from conclusively determining that no criminal conduct occurred. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. In other words, there is insufficient evidence to prove that Trump had obstructed justice. Granted that Trump was dishonest, misleading, and willing to put an end to the investigation, there is insufficient proof that Trump was guilty of corrupt or criminal intent to obstruct justice. Thus, the central focus of debate is whether Trump tried to obstruct the investigation with corrupt intent. To clarify this notion of intent, consider that for any act that an agent performs, there is an underlying reason upon which the act is performed. In Trump's case, if we assume he put an end to the investigation, then his underlying reason that motivated him to do so was either because A, he wanted to avoid an unfounded and disingenuous investigation from negatively impacting his ability to run the country as a president, or B, he wanted to maliciously cover up evidence of a crime that he knowingly and willingly committed. Although neither A nor B are mutually exclusive possibilities, since Mueller could not and in fact did not prove that an underlying crime of conspiracy or coordination was committed, then there's good reason to believe that if there was obstruction, then Trump acted on the basis of A, which does not amount to corrupt intent, a necessary condition to charge him or anyone with obstruction of justice. One alleged instance of obstruction of justice in Mueller's report that was unsurprisingly taken out of context on mainstream news outlets was Trump's reaction to the appointment of the special counsel. When Jeff Sessions, former Attorney General, told President Trump that a special counsel had been appointed for the Russia probe, Trump said, "Oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm fucked." Understandably, without the proper context and with an anti-Trump mindset, it's easy to jump to the conclusion that Trump is guilty of something criminal, and that he's going to do whatever it takes to impede the investigation to hide a criminal activity. However, what's missing, a crucial component of the report that the mass media left out, is that Trump also said, "Everyone tells me if you get one of these independent counsels, it ruins your presidency. It takes years and years and I won't be able to get anything done. This is the worst thing that ever happened to me." In this context, Trump appears to be concerned that having an investigation in general while in office might ruin his presidency. Trump once said in an interview with Lester Holt on NBC that
this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election.
Thus, if we assume that this Russia thing is made up, then the investigation into Russia collusion is baseless. However, a baseless investigation is nonetheless an investigation that would negatively impact Trump's ability to run the country effectively. It is in this respect that Trump eloquently said, "I'm fucked." There's no need to review the other 9 instances of possible obstruction, along with the weak evidence to support each case, since collectively they fail to indicate a Machiavellian plot to obstruct a crime that was never committed, but rather to end a disingenuous, politically damaging investigation, which in and of itself is not criminal. And that leads to the main point I wanted to make about Mueller's conclusion on obstruction. If there was no collusion, coordination, conspiracy, or any underlying crime, then there can be no obstruction of justice. After all, you cannot obstruct justice if there is no injustice. Thus, since Trump was not involved in any criminal activity with the Russian government, it makes no sense for Trump to cover up a crime that he did not commit. Part 3. Real Obstruction. Clinton's Private Server and CrowdStrike. If the predominantly left-leaning mainstream media were morally concerned about the injustices of Trump's alleged obstruction, then why didn't these same news organizations report the real obstruction of an actual crime during the investigation of Hillary Clinton's mishandling of top-secret, classified government information? In this section, I will expose the inconsistency, hypocrisy, and blindness to morality and justice, due in large part to political affiliation, For the people involved in the Clinton email investigation were not only left-leaning pro-Clinton supporters, but also involved in handling the early stages of the Trump-Russia collusion investigation.
You're listening to ASP Stuff Radio.
In January 2009, 8 days before Hillary Clinton was sworn in as Secretary of State, Clinton set up a private email server that she used throughout her tenure. This meant that from 2009 until 2013, the State Department never had access to any of her emails, nor could the department store them for record. A couple of months after the discovery of Clinton's private server, the Inspectors General of the Intelligence Community and State Department sent a June 2015 memorandum to the Justice Department expressing concern about the presence of hundreds of classified and top-secret government information from U.S. intelligence agencies such as the CIA and NSA in emails stored in Clinton's personal email account. Shortly after, an FBI probe was initiated in July to determine how classified information was handled on the Clinton server. Before I point out several real cases of obstruction of justice in relation with the Clinton email investigation, let's examine how Mueller defines obstruction in his report. According to Mueller, obstruction involves, quote, corrupt conduct capable of producing an effect that prevents justice from being duly administered regardless of the means employed. An effort to influence a proceeding can qualify as an endeavor to obstruct justice, even if the effort was subtle or circuitous, and however cleverly or with whatever cloaking of purpose it was made. The verbs obstruct or impede are broad and can refer to anything that blocks, makes difficult, or hinders, unquote. With this definition in mind, consider first the most obvious case of obstruction. On March 2, 2015, the Select Committee on Benghazi issued a subpoena for Clinton to submit all of her Benghazi-related emails. However, on March 9th, Clinton's Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills sent an email to inform Paul Gambetta about the subpoena. Gambetta was a technician from Platte River Networks, Clinton's computer services provider. Gambetta decided to erase and destroy the emails beyond recovery using a free and open source and therefore unsafe program called BleachBit between March 25th and March 31st. Prior to that questionable act, months before Clinton's private server was discovered, Mills had already requested Gambetta to delete those emails on behalf of Clinton. But he forgot to carry out the task until the subpoena was issued. Gambetta told the FBI that he had an oh shit moment when he realized he forgot to delete the emails the first time. This was supposed to justify his reasoning for deleting the emails. However, the deletion of those emails while under subpoena from Congress is an effort to destroy evidence, especially considering it was unnecessary to additionally use a software program that is designed to prevent the recovery of deleted files.
Mr. Gambetta, do you intend to make an opening statement?
On advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer and assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Although Gambetta pled the Fifth and refused to testify in front of the House Oversight Committee, it all worked out in the end because former FBI Director James Comey, who was conducting the investigation, claimed that he did not have, quote, evidence to disbelieve Gambetta's account. A second case of obstruction. On July 5th, 2016, James Comey publicly announced at a press conference that no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against Clinton for her use of a private email server on the basis that
all the cases prosecuted involved some combination of clearly intentional and willful mishandling of classified information or vast quantities of information exposed in such a way as to support an inference of intentional misconduct, or indications of disloyalty to the United States, or efforts to obstruct justice. We do not see those things here.
Furthermore, Comey stated that
although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information.
So again, I want to repeat that. Comey states, although we did not find clear evidence that Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. This is a clever way of obstructing justice, for the reason that it is the job of the Justice Department prosecutors, not the FBI, to decide whether to file criminal charges against Clinton. And even though Comey acknowledges this fact, he still insisted that we, the FBI, are expressing to justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case. Comey is essentially recommending that the DOJ not criminally prosecute Clinton, which is an effort to influence a proceeding. This act appears to be similar to what the Democrats were accusing Trump of doing, namely recommending that Comey not fire Michael Flynn, Trump's then national security advisor. However, the crucial difference is that in Clinton's case, since there was an underlying crime to obstruct, Comey's recommendation not to prosecute Clinton officially put an end to the investigation, and therefore exonerating her. In a separate but not unrelated incident, Comey was terminated not because Trump fired him out of his own volition. The media neglected the important detail that Trump was acting on behalf of Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who was strongly advised to remove Comey by Rod Rosenstein's evaluation of his handling of the Clinton email investigation. Rosenstein elaborates in his memorandum to Sessions that Comey was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority and announce his conclusion at a press conference that the case should be closed without prosecution. It is not the function of the director to make such an announcement. At most, the director should have said that the FBI had completed its investigation and presented its findings to federal prosecutors. The FBI director is never empowered to supplant federal prosecutors and assume command of the Justice Department. Thus, even though Comey absolved Clinton's wrongdoing, he himself was not absolved of his own wrongdoing. A third case of obstruction pertains to this notion of intent, or mens rea, which in Latin means guilty mind. Comey claims that intent is a prerequisite of gross negligence. However, many critics have argued that gross negligence does not require intent or a guilty mind. After all, do you need to intend to mishandle top-secret information on a personal email system, or willfully do so with a guilty conscience? The act of gross negligence is a crime in and of itself, so intent is not an element of the crime. In other words, exposing highly classified information on the server, whether you intend to or not, is inherently a crime. If you steal liquor from a convenience store, then you committed a crime of theft, regardless of intent. If you were caught speeding on the freeway, but you told a police officer that you didn't recognize or realize that you were speeding or that you didn't intend to speed, the officer will not make an exception in your case since speeding is illegal, regardless of intent. In April 2016, Obama said in a TV interview that Clinton would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy. She has not jeopardized America's national security. There's a carelessness in terms of managing emails that she has owned and she recognizes. But I also think it's important to keep this in perspective. So let me go ahead and play that clip in its entirety.
We've learned that over 2,000 of her emails contain classified material. 22 of the emails had top secret information. Can you still say flatly that she did not jeopardize America's secrets?
Here's what I know. Hillary Clinton was an outstanding Secretary of State. She would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy. And what I also know, because I handle a lot of classified information, is that there's classified and then there's classified. There's stuff that is really top secret, and there's stuff that basically stuff that you could get in open source.
But last October, you were prepared to say she hadn't jeopardized, and the question is, can you still say that?
I continue to believe that she has not jeopardized America's national security. Now, what I've also said is that, and she's acknowledged, that there's a carelessness in terms of managing emails that she has owned and she recognizes.
There's a carelessness in terms of managing emails that she has owned and she recognizes, but I also think it's important to keep this in perspective. Indeed, it's very important that we keep this in perspective. Many reports have claimed that the top secret information, or as Obama says, top secret information stored on Clinton's unsecure private server were hacked and sent to an external server in China for a period of 4 years. As a result, between 2010 and 2012, almost all United States CIA operations in China were wiped out. The New York Times reported that 18 to 20 CIA informants in China were found killed or imprisoned over a 3-year period. Of course, Clinton may have had no intention of threatening national security, but that's exactly why intent is not or should not be a requirement for gross negligence, to maintain moral and legal accountability for the extreme carelessness of actions that lead to unintended and unfortunate tragedies.
She would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy.
Nonetheless, when Comey maintained that Clinton did not commit gross negligence because she lacked the requisite intent, this would count as a subtle or certainly another clever way of blocking an investigation from moving forward. In fact, the investigation was dropped because intent could not be proven. A fourth case of obstruction occurs when Comey rephrased Clinton's action as extremely careless, which is not a crime, rather than calling it gross negligence, which is a chargeable offense. Briefly, gross negligence involves a reckless disregard for the safety of others. You fail to use even the slightest degree of care. Being careless, much less extremely careless, is also not giving adequate attention or thought to avoiding harm to others. Notice the phrases are synonymous. However, the latter term is not a legal term. Therefore, because Clinton was only extremely careless in her actions, she could not be charged with a crime, even though setting up a private server which contained sensitive government information that would put our national security at risk is evidence of a reckless disregard for the safety of others. Curiously, Comey had originally accused Clinton of being grossly negligent in mishandling classified information in a draft dated May 2nd, 2016. But that was modified by, and under the guidance of, former FBI investigator Peter Strzok, who wrote that Clinton had merely been extremely careless in a draft dated June 10th, 2016. Strzok, who questionably led the FBI's probe into Clinton's private email server, therefore changed the language Comey had originally used to describe Clinton's actions from grossly negligent to extremely careless. Yet, for some unknown reason, semantic gymnastics is not deemed an overt case of obstructing justice, or should I say, blocking fairness. A fifth case of obstruction, and this one pulls the rabbit out of the hat, which would explain why Comey announced to the press that no reasonable prosecutor would bring a case against Clinton, and why Strzok changed the language from gross negligence to extremely careless. On March 12th of this year, 2019, the transcripts of Lisa Page's private testimony were finally released to the public. Page, a former FBI lawyer and mistress of Peter Strzok, both of whom expressed anti-Trump sentiments in their text message exchange, testified that officials in the Bureau, including James Comey, had in fact discussed Espionage Act charges against Clinton, citing gross negligence. But the Justice Department shut them down repeatedly. When asked if the FBI believed Clinton may have committed gross negligence, Page responded, "We, in fact, the director, Comey, because on its face, it did seem like there's a potential here for this to be the charge. and we had multiple conversations with the Justice Department about charging gross negligence. However, Page stated that the DOJ put a stop to that. She continues, quote, "The Justice Department's assessment was that it was constitutionally vague, so that they did not actually feel that they could permissibly bring that charge. We had multiple conversations with the Justice Department about bringing a gross negligence charge, and the advice that we got from the department was that it was constitutionally vague and not sustainable," unquote. U.S. Representative John Ratcliffe asked Page to clarify. He says, "When you say advice you got from the department, you're making it sound like it was the department that told you, you're not going to charge gross negligence because we're the prosecutors and we're telling you we're not going to." To which Page responds, "That's correct." Shockingly, the FBI was never acting independently of the DOJ, contrary to Comey's July 2016 public statement to the press, but rather under the direct guidance and influence of the DOJ with respect to the investigation of Clinton's mishandling of classified information on her private server. To emphasize this critical revelation, which was unfortunately unreported by the mainstream media, Page told Congressional Investigations on July 13th, 2018, quote, "Everybody talks about this as if this was the FBI investigation, and the truth of the matter is that there was not a single investigative step that we did not take in consultation with or at the direction of the Justice Department," unquote. Once again, Comey originally intended to criminally prosecute Clinton for gross negligence, but it was Obama's DOJ that ordered the FBI not to charge Clinton because the charge was constitutionally vague, given that intent is necessary for gross negligence, and evidence of intent could not be adequately determined. However, as previously mentioned, most critics argue that gross negligence statute explicitly does not require intent of any kind, and so corrupt intent is not a prerequisite. Even if the FBI were able to prove intent, that Clinton knowingly and willingly mishandled classified information and could not care less of putting our national security at risk, gross negligence would still have been off the table. Because according to a chart of available statutes for prosecuting the former Secretary of State, gross negligence was specifically excluded from the chargeable statutes available to the FBI during the investigation. In other words, among the criminal acts to investigate, the FBI was recommended by the DOJ not to look into gross negligence since it wasn't on the chart, despite the FBI already suspecting gross negligence.
We did our investigation the right way. Only facts matter, and the FBI found them here in an entirely apolitical and professional way. I couldn't be prouder to be part of this organization. Thank you very much.
Lisa Page's testimony also exposes a blatant lie told by former Obama Attorney General Loretta Lynch, the head of the Department of Justice, when she claimed that it was strictly the FBI's decision to determine whether to prosecute Clinton. She said, quote, "I will be accepting the FBI's recommendations and their plans for going forward," unquote. But Page's testimony clearly shows that Loretta Lynch lied, since according to Page, the DOJ pushed back multiple times on their recommendations to bring a charge of gross negligence against Clinton. So, not only did the DOJ lie, they also excluded gross negligence from a list of charges for the FBI to investigate, and dismissed the charge despite glaring evidence of gross negligence presented by the FBI. Are these not solid cases of obstruction of justice? Where was the media's moral outrage? Where is the justice in the Department of Justice? The DOJ is supposed to enforce the laws of Congress, not pass legal judgment on them.
What I can assure the American people is that this investigation was done honestly, competently, and independently. No outside influence of any kind was brought to bear.
Well, with the exception of the influence of the Department of Justice.
You're listening to ASP Stuff Radio.
Now, in relation with the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy, there is one critical case of obstruction of justice that stands out, and it pertains to the core allegation that helped spark the Russiagate scandal. Around late April 2016, abnormalities in the Democratic National Committee's email system were detected, and it was later allegedly confirmed on July 29th by the DNC that their computer server was hacked by Russians. On July 31st, the FBI officially launched its formal counterintelligence investigation on Russian interference in the U.S. election. However, according to James Comey, when the FBI requested direct access to the DNC's servers, the DNC denied the request, therefore preventing them from examining their servers. Furthermore, the DNC lied that the FBI never attempted to reach anyone at the DNC, although this has been disputed. Comey in fact testified that they made multiple requests at different levels to access the DNC servers, but of no avail. Instead, Comey reluctantly agreed that the DNC would hire a, quote, highly respected private company called CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity technology company that would access the DNC servers, investigate, and provide the necessary information to the FBI. Comey insisted that he would have preferred, quote, to have access hands-on ourselves if that's possible, unquote. Now bear in mind that CrowdStrike is responsible for accusing the Russians for hacking the DNC during the 2016 election, an allegation that incited the Trump-Russia collusion conspiracy. But consider 3 facts about CrowdStrike that indicate a conflict of interest. First, the president of CrowdStrike is Sean Henry, a former FBI agent who used to be the executive assistant director to Robert Mueller. Second, CrowdStrike is connected to the Obama administration since the company's chief risk officer, Stephen Chabinsky, was appointed to Obama's Commission on Enhancing National Cybersecurity in April 2016. And third, the co-founder and chief technology officer of CrowdStrike is Dmitry Alberotle, who, in a separate controversial incident in December 2016, misread data and falsely attributed computer hacking in Ukraine to the Russians. Alberotle is known for his anti-Russian sentiments. In fact, CrowdStrike is linked to the Atlantic Council, which is known as an anti-Russian think tank. Why would the DNC, a victim of a cybercrime, refuse to cooperate with the FBI in solving that crime? And why did the FBI yield to the DNC? Wouldn't the FBI prefer first-hand access to the most vital information in order to make their own determination of the exact origins of the so-called hack? Why rely on the forensic analysis provided by CrowdStrike, a third party hired specifically by the DNC? And isn't the DNC's refusal to grant the FBI's request to access their servers and data an attempt to impede the investigation, an act that, as Mueller defines, blocks, makes difficult, or hinders an ongoing investigation? To this day, the FBI has never officially examined the DNC's computer servers to verify the claims and reports produced by CrowdStrike. As a matter of fact, this may explain why Mueller does not definitively claim in his report that Russian officials hacked into the DNC and stole emails to sway the 2016 presidential election. Instead, he says, quote, the GRU units, or Russian intelligence officers, appear to have stolen thousands of emails and attachments, which were later released by WikiLeaks in July 2016, unquote. Why is the word appear in the report? If Mueller knows that the GRU hacked the DNC server and stole emails, that is, if Mueller had conclusive evidence, he would remove the qualifying word appear and instead claim that the GRU in fact hacked the DNC server. At least Mueller's statement is consistent with the Department of Homeland Security, an officer of the Director of National Intelligence, when they issued a joint statement before Mueller's report was released, maintaining that, quote, the U.S. intelligence community is confident that the Russian government directed the recent compromises of emails from U.S. persons and institutions, including the U.S. political organizations, unquote. Thus, unless the FBI had thoroughly and critically examined the DNC servers and confirmed their analysis with CrowdStrike, it cannot be known with indubitable confidence that the Russians are in fact the source of the hack and stolen emails. It is possible, in other words, that the Russians did not hack the DNC at all. If you enjoy our show, please support us at aspstuffradio.com or directly at paypal.me/ASP Stuff Radio. Donate. Thank you for your support and thank you for listening.